this didn't work out. Maybe I failed, maybe others failed me, doesn't really matter, but that didn't work out. Every one of us got to this place in our life doing hard things. Lawyers being able to be the diverse individuals that they are.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back. We are in season 2 of the What You're About podcast with me, Chad Abood. And this season is a really special one for me because it is a collab season with the Goodlawyer podcast. And the reason why we wanted to do the collab this year is because we found a really nice overlap in our mission. And so if you listen to season 1 of the What You're About podcast, you'll know that I really love to uncover the natural gifts of leaders and entrepreneurs and figure out how they brought those gifts into their career. And the beautiful thing about Goodlawyer is it gives the opportunity for so many lawyers to do that because it's a platform that creates access for incredible companies to get talented lawyers from the Goodlawyer network on a fractional work structure. And really what this does is it gives lawyers a way to practice law within a framework that works within their life goals and their needs and their obligations, but it also allows the companies to get access to seasoned talent in a way that suits their business, their goals, their cost structure. And so it's a beautiful blending of the two. And that's why we wanted to bring ourselves together. And we probably have the most perfect person to chat with today that can speak to all sides of this from a fractional GC perspective and from a Goodlawyer perspective. So Pauline Chan, first of all, honored to call you a friend. And so thank you so much for spending the time. And you have such an incredible array of things going on in your life. You're a serial entrepreneur, and I really want to get into the fortune cookie business. We're definitely going to talk about the bar studio. Also, you're a fractional general counsel. You're the head of lawyer experience at Goodlawyer. You're a keynote speaker. There's a lot of things going on in your life, and I want to get into all of them. So thank you so much for sharing your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Chad. I could not be more excited to be here today.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess the biggest thing that for a lot of folks that may not have had the chance to chat with you one-on-one yet is how does someone starts out in BigLaw, goes in-house, and then almost leaves the legal industry to start your bar studio? How does that person come back with such a vengeance and so much passion for being in the legal industry and helping others to discover a passion for the legal industry? Like, that feels like a pretty far bridge to cross. And so how does that happen? How does someone go from wanting to be out to being fully back in?
So I'll tell you this, I never envisioned for a second that I was coming back. There was just no chance that was ever going to happen. I think, like, honestly, it was kind of through the weirdness of, going out there and building a path for myself that I just knew I didn't want to practice anymore. So I was going to build a new path for me that did not involve practice. And it was actually through the weirdness of which has now since happened several more times. So it's not that weird, but the weirdness of going out there and sort of putting yourself out there into the world and saying, okay, this didn't work out. Maybe I failed. Maybe others failed me. Doesn't really matter, but that didn't work out. And now I'm looking for something new and different. I'm going to get out there and do things that I've never done before, meet people I've never met before, get into situations that are outside of my comfort zone. It was kind of through the weirdness of that, building the studio that ultimately, strangely enough, led me back to law. So the story is really just that I was probably months, maybe 2, 3 months away from quitting law entirely and just running off into the sunset, happy forever with my bar studio. When I got a LinkedIn message from Goodlawyer asking me, as a small business owner, if I was interested in getting a free 15-minute legal advice session during COVID, because it's tough times for small businesses and Goodlawyer wanted to
Right.
help. So it was through getting that message that I looked at the message and I was like, well, no, thank you, because I'm a lawyer and I can do that. But wait a minute, I'm just a little bit curious though. Like, what are you? Why are you offering me this? Who are your lawyers? What are you doing? That kind of thing. it was also, I guess, curiosity, really, just always being a little bit curious, even if I was like, no, never again. I was still just a little bit curious what they were doing. And so it was like, okay, well, what's Goodlawyer? Tell me more about what's happening. And through those conversations, realized, okay, well, I'm still a lawyer and I'm just curious enough about what you guys are doing and selling here that I'll try it out. And through that, it kind of led me back into
Right.
practice. And then as I got back into practice and also just working with Goodlawyer, realizing, oh my God, this might actually be the solution to all of the things that I really didn't love about law. And I knew that at this point it wasn't just me. There were so many other lawyers out there that were unhappy and still in it, or lawyers that had already left because of the same reasons or very similar reasons. And it was through that that I realized, oh my God, there's something here that could work for all of these lawyers that are probably very, very good at what they do and very, very smart, but it was the structure of the system that
Right.
wasn't going to allow them to continue down that path or making them very unhappy down as they go down that path. And so with that, I'm like, well, I found something that works for me and that I'm so happy about and so excited about. I need to help spread this out into the world. And it never started out as making change. It was simply, I found something really great and I want to tell everybody I know about it so that maybe it'll work out for them and maybe it can help them along their journey. So
I
yeah,
love
that's
that
sort of where it started.
curiosity piece. That curiosity is so interesting, right? That you can go from a place of feeling so disassociated and dark on an industry that, I grew up in as well, and have felt similar feelings of during my career, to feeling so passionate about it. And the thing that I love about curiosity is, like, it's free. It's available 24/7. And all it takes is, like, you could have not asked the question. You could have just
Mm,
said, like, no, thanks, I'm a lawyer, I'm all good here, and not asked the question. And your path would have been so divergent. Like, you would have done something totally different, would have been great. But this is something that I hope folks who, everyone who already follows you on LinkedIn and you have such an amazing message there would know this. But for anyone who's meeting you here for the first time, like, that curiosity that you have, that opens up so many paths. I really am a big believer of, like, curiosity plus humility, right? Because humility comes very closely to, like, authentic curiosity, because you're almost saying to yourself, I don't know, but I'm keen to learn.
yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much you've, achieved in your life. That curiosity plus humility that you showed, like, it created this massive opportunity. And so, okay, so you're curious, you start learning a little bit about Goodlawyer, but you've still got a bar studio. You're trying to get through COVID here. Like, what were you learning about yourself as you were thinking, like, I've got this cool entrepreneurial thing. There's something else going on in Goodlawyer. Maybe I'm not done with being a lawyer. Like, what was it that pulled you back in? Was it just COVID saying, hey, bar studio's not going to open right now? And you were like, hey, I still know how to do this lawyer thing. Like, what pulled you back over into saying law could be for me again?
Uh, I guess I would say mainly it would be that I get to do law, I get to practice how I want to, when I want to, where I want to. It's all up to me. I get to choose, I get to make the decisions. If there's going to be and just as a just as a person, I think in my personal life, my focus in pretty much everything I do has always been like, how do we make this more efficient? The fun things,
Mm,
whatever, we don't need to make that efficient, but we do need to make the drudgery of life efficient. But yet, I had never ever turned that lens onto what my law practice looked like. It was just simply, okay, this is the way it's always been done. I'm just going to do it this way. People who are smarter than me and more experienced and more successful than me are telling me this is the way it's done. So I'm going to do it. But then as soon as I turned that lens of efficiency onto my practice life, all I could think was like, oh my God, this is so inefficient. It could be done better in these following ways. There's other ways I'm sure that I don't even know that it can be done better, but it can be done better so that it is not eating up literally every single minute of my life. And if I
right.
could become more efficient, then there's actually a way for me to do more of the things that I love, both in work and personally as well. And so that's these other businesses and the bar studio, and then also have a family and those sorts of things. And if I can do it in the way that I want to, which there's a huge focus on efficiency, but also a huge focus on, okay, this is my schedule. This is just what it needs to be this week or next week or whatever. It changes on a weekly basis. This is my schedule. This is where I can do it and be most efficient and effective at doing this week. Maybe next week that is different. If I could find a way to practice the way that I want to, that suits my life, both professionally and personally, then I want to do it. I mean, I like practice. I did like practice. I like helping clients. What I didn't like was all the stuff that's around it, right?
Right.
That is sort of mandated to you by the people you work for. So whether that's in a traditional firm or whether that is in an in-house department.
Right. Right. You're kind of trying to figure out what are the pieces of the industry that I like the most, and then how do I work those within my life? And
Yeah.
I actually think it's a pretty important nuance for a lot of folks that are consider either you already have your own firm or you're thinking about doing something that's more like what Pauline does in a kind of fractional GC space, which is it's not that your work is driving every single other thing that you can do with your time. It is you are choosing how you're going to work within the confines of all the other things that you do. And so if you're Pauline, there's lots of things. And so, for folks that want to feel the inspiration of what it looks like to really intentionally design a life like this, I mean, you obviously have a family, you've got kids, I'm a parent of only one, not two. So, I only have half of that energy going out, but you've also got businesses at the same time. So tell us a little bit about, and this one is a little bit newer and I'm dying to learn more about it, which is like the fortune cookie business and how it started. And how do these businesses also play a role within how you lawyer and how you live?
So yeah, so I guess with the businesses, it's the first time ever when I went to start up the fitness studio, the bar studio. And really, I guess the fortune cookie company, just the first time that I've been so close to such a small business in the startup phase. So before that, I had always worked with a lot of big, medium to large, very large size companies. And obviously, the legal work and the legal advice and strategy and all of that fits in a little bit differently. And the whole pace of the businesses that I'd worked with up to that point, a little bit different. And frankly, all the resources and capacity that all the people have, right? Inside of the small business, I just remember thinking to myself, at least with the bar studio, what would we have done if we didn't have me doing the legal work for it? Had we
Right.
needed to get somebody to help us with whatever, even just the basic incorporation and the shareholders agreement, and then the initial, startup contracts that we need, waivers and whatever, how do businesses do this? Like, how do they actually afford this? They can't afford it. They're just getting going. They can't afford this. They don't understand it either. So they have a sense of what they need done, but then they don't really understand sort of maybe the long-term implications of what they're doing right now or medium or short term. They just know that it needs to be done. They kind of have a
Mhm.
sense of it, but they don't know exactly what needs to be done, but they can't afford it either. And so what happens is, like, from what I understand, most businesses are like, well, we kind of just skip that. We get no legal help. We kind of gloss over the things that we don't know and copy and paste from other businesses and just kind of cover our eyes mostly and be like, okay, I hope this works out. And there's nothing necessary. I mean, there is something wrong with that, but you do what you can with the resources that you have and the capacity constraints and all of that, right? So for me, it was a really very eye-opening experience to think, I'm a lawyer, I'm doing this for my company, but what are these other businesses doing? They don't have help. And then how far down the road do they get when they suddenly realize, oh my God, this is a big problem. We need to get
Right.
help with this. Or maybe they don't even realize it until they manage to talk to a lawyer who will give them the time and say, hey, actually, if you did it like this, it would be better, or it would help pave the way for some big opportunity in the future. So that was a really eye opening moment for me. And I remember thinking to myself, I went to law school to help people, help businesses. And so far, I feel like I've done none of that. I've done none of that. I've charged a lot of people a lot of money for my time, which I didn't see very much of. But did they actually feel like I helped them? Not really. But then I got working with some of the Goodlawyer clients, and my clients were so thankful, so grateful for the help, and they really could see how lawyers are providing value beyond just simply saying, oh, well, this is the risk, or oh, here's a comma that was missed in your contract, and it's not
Right.
a very good contract because of that.
Yeah, you're a very high impact person. This is one
Yeah.
thing that I've really taken from you is that, not only do you create a lot of impact on people when you speak, um, but you also, I think, take a lot of good energy from being impactful. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that when you're working with companies that are in the startup and the scale up mode, is that they're going to be very appreciative because you're opening their eyes to things they never would have thought of before, and you're really helping them build a way of thinking that's so important to them. And I can totally understand how that would have been so resonant for you
Hmm.
when you're so you're walking away from a legal career, you start building businesses, you get pulled back in. As you were doing these like really interesting transitions, were you getting much pushback from like those closest to you about like what's the deal? Like you're at a national law firm, you're in-house, you're like building this career, then you're gonna what, do a bar studio, and then now what? You're gonna like help startups? Like were you getting a lot of confusion, or were people saying like, no, that makes sense for Pauline? Like how were those transitions?
I mean, from my family, I suppose it would be mainly my dad was just very much traditional energy of like, you went to law school, we spent how much money on all of that, you spent how much time on all of that, and now you're like, I had to open a bar studio, I'm going to teach fitness. So
Right.
there was definitely pushback there. I would say from some of my some peers, I would say, or colleagues, acquaintances in the profession, there was also some of that energy, and it was like, well, okay, like, whoa, what are you doing? Maybe it's just the firm, maybe it's the
Right.
specific situation you're in that's not very good for you, but like, you just got to hang in there, and you just got to put your head down and keep grinding, and it'll be fine. It's your early years; those are tough years. You
Hmm.
you don't think you can do it, and all of these things. So it was very much like you just got to keep pushing, you just got to keep going. And the traditional wisdom and knowledge is that just keep pushing, and you'll push
Right.
through, and then you'll find yourself on the other side. um, I think for me, i I think at the point where I was doing all of these things, a little bit of bar studio, a little bit of practice, a little bit of maybe, working with new different types of startup clients. For me, I think by this point, I had realized, okay, well, I know myself. I've done a lot of soul searching, a lot of discussions with those closest to me, including my husband, about what do I want out of life? What do we want out of life? What do we ultimately see for ourselves in the future? And then working backwards and being like, okay, this is not going to work for me. This is not going to work for me. This is not going to work for me. Do I know what's going to work for me? Sort of, maybe, but those are things I still need to test and again, like you said earlier, get curious about and figure out, is that actually going to work for me? Is that actually something I want? In reality, what does that actually look like? Because it's always like, oh, it's so glorious over there. The green, the grass is so much greener, but you don't know until you test it out, right? So I
Yeah.
didn't know really what I wanted, but I did know what I didn't want. And that to me is just as powerful as knowing what you do want. Because if you know you don't want it, you know which direction you're turning, probably the opposite direction or any other direction that is not that way.
And so,
So
what were some of those things that were like really popping out for you? Because, like, that is the work. I deeply believe that if you know who you are, and I was talking with someone earlier today, actually, another good lawyer, and we were talking about career trajectories. And I think the way we were trained was like, look for this title or look for
yeah,
this thing, and that's like the next step. And what we were talking about was, I really do believe the hub of everything is if you know who you are and what you deeply care about and how you create the most impact. I
mhm,
feel like you don't need to know always like, oh, it's got to be this next title or this next job. Because what I do find is, and I think your career is a great example of this, if you put in that hard effort that doesn't have this obvious output, like doing that internal reflection of who am I, what do I care about, what do I value, it doesn't have this obvious output. But you
yeah,
do it, and then if you start sharing it and you start letting other people know, great opportunities, I believe, like they always continue to find you. And I think the good lawyer one is a great example of that. And so for you, like what were these things that were popping up that felt very like, whoa, no
yeah.
thanks, like that's definitely not for me? And why did you feel that way? Why was it so strong?
So I think the first thing that I realized was that I don't think I ever really want to practice law full time. I think the pressures potentially from being in a traditional environment, the anxiety, the stress of the magnitude of the types of things that you're dealing with for your clients, and how meaningful and how highly impactful those things can be for your client, especially when you're dealing with smaller sized businesses. Even medium, it doesn't really matter, any business, right? Like that when you know them and you care about what they're doing and you know that what you're doing has such an impact on that, it just feels to me like that's not something I want to do 30, 40 hours a week, because it then begins to live in my brain 24/7. And there's nothing I can
Mhm.
do. Like I can do the things to try and manage it, but why? I know through testing that if I practice, whatever, 10 to 20 hours a week, I can I can very easily step away from that and manage my stress and mental health in a way that allows me to continue to practice. For me, the full-time route was never going to be something that I wanted to do again. And in the moment that I found Goodlawyer, there was really no other way to practice part-time other than you could get a part-time role, but really what you're doing is almost full-time work for part-time pay.
Right.
And nobody
Right.
wants to do that, right? So there was no such road. And so that was one of the biggest things for me, was that I need to practice part-time. And that is going to allow me to take care of my mental health. And it also dovetails nicely with the fact that I realized over time I'm not a person who does just one thing. I can't. It starts to feel stale for me. I'm not very motivated or inspired. I need to sort of be doing a lot of different things. And that's what keeps my brain going on all different fronts for all the different work things I'm doing. So because I was never going to be the person that wanted to do just one thing, I was always going to have other things in my life, like these other businesses, that I needed to make time for. And the traditional paths of practice don't allow for that. You're either fully in or you're not. And it's just that
Right.
simple. Other than that other situation I mentioned, part time, almost full time work for part time pay. Nobody wants that.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
between those two things, you know what? And actually, a third thing I would add, I think just for me, looking around at the traditional work environments, I could see there's a lot of struggles, I think, that people end up having in their personal relationships, and this manifests itself
Right.
in divorces and all kinds of terrible things like that, but also just families that are sort of they're not uh, cohesive the way I want it to be cohesive. So, certain parents are not available at all these different
Mhm.
times because they're working. I didn't want that. And I also didn't want to get a nanny. And then again, I always say there's no judgment about any of this. It's just not what I wanted for me. And there was no world that I could see for myself that practice was going to let me do different things and be just as engaged in those different things, to work part-time practicing, and also to just simply be able to go off and do whatever I felt like with my family for whatever the week or the month
Yeah.
or whatever it was, because I couldn't do that in those traditional models. I wasn't going to be able to have time and energy left at the end of the day for my family.
Yeah, and I know that I appreciate you sharing that, because I know that you've also been an incredible proponent for the industry. You gave a keynote at Canadian Lawyer Magazine's conference this summer, even about touching on these themes about what it's like to be a participant in an industry that probably hasn't evolved as quickly on the mental health side as many of the stakeholders within it wish it would. And so I always found that a bit funny, where you have a lot of lawyers who are clearly struggling. Data's given us that. They will agree with anyone that asks them how difficult it is on their mental health. Yet the industry as a whole has been very, very slow to improve the conditions, the style of working, and it's remained very difficult. It's had a lot of downstream impacts. I know you've been a big proponent of, we have to have change, we have to create change, we have to be change. And so, if you can, like, what are the elements of like the mental health piece that are like nearest and dearest to you from either your own experience or what you're trying to help folks with as the head of lawyer experience at Goodlawyer now?
So, I mean, it started with like, for me, it starts with my experience, which is just simply at in part of my career, one of my colleagues had actually broken her arm and was in the hospital for a month because of it. And through conversations with her, we were talking, and the conversation really just went like, I said to her, "You are so lucky you were in the hospital for a month and you don't have to work." And she was like, "Oh, I know. I'm so glad this happened." Like, as we're having this conversation, it seems perfectly normal, right? But then as time passes and you mention this to other people, non-lawyers, frankly, they're like, that's not really very healthy. Maybe you need to talk to somebody or do something to make some change.
Right.
And I think the worst part of it is that, okay, I realized that. And for me, that was a pivotal moment when I started taking this walk into, I'm never going to practice again, and then ending up where I am now. But that's a pivotal moment for me. However, what has actually I've realized is as I tell people this story, just about every single person I say this to, lawyers and non-lawyers, but definitely lawyers, everybody says, "Oh, me too. I felt that way. I'm feeling that way. I continue, like it's continuing to happen and blah blah blah." And I we need to change. Like everybody knows this is a problem. We need to change. But I really think that the problem in the profession is that the stigma is so strong. It is so strong. If you say that you are having mental health issues because of work, it's because you're not strong enough, you're not
Mhm.
tough enough, you aren't doing the things that you need to do to take care of your mental health, which I would argue there's no way to, but that's for later. You're not doing the things you need to, you're not smart enough, you're not dedicated enough, you're weak. It's just all of the stigma that people know that they are feeling a certain way, but even if they know they are feeling a certain way and they chalked it up to, okay, this is a mental health issue, I cannot continue like this and it's because of my work and I need some change in my work, that's where it all stops. There's no change happening. You go tell somebody in any of those environments that you are struggling and you need help, you no longer know if you have job stability,
Right.
is the way I see it. And most of the lawyers that I talk to, this is the way they feel as well. I can't bring this up. Sure, I might get a little bit of, um, I don't want to say lip service, but I'll get, you get a little bit of, okay, well, there's this program and maybe you can try this out, or maybe you can talk to this person and maybe you can get some help there. But that's
Mhm.
it. That's the one and only thing that actually might happen. And then beyond that, it just feels like, oh, you're still in this position, you still feel this way. And then eventually, unfortunately, it just feels like either the lawyer is forced to leave, the lawyer feels like they have to leave, or there's no other way, or they're told to leave for other reasons, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you're sharing, I mean, I've also heard this 100 times, felt it in my own way, throughout my career as well. I think the greatest thing that I feel like that you're doing is you're just being the example. Because, like, yes, you have lots of great ideas about how the industry can and should change, but this is what I offer to folks whenever they're struggling with something that they wish was different. Is it's one thing to yell at the Titanic, and it's another thing to, like, build your boat and just start, like, rowing in the direction that makes the most sense for you. Because what you've done by sharing this message and proving, like, you can have an incredibly valuable and impactful career as you do as a fractional general counsel. You can also help move the industry forward as the head of lawyer experience. You can also have your own businesses. You can have your family. You can do the things, and you can be compensated fairly for all of that effort. And I actually think that's the most powerful part of the message, is the example. And I learned this actually at being a parent, which is like, I can say whatever I want to our daughter.
Yep.
Does not matter, right? But she notices what we do. And you know how I figured this out actually? Road rage. So we were like driving around, and she's 5 now, but even when she was like 2 or 3 years old, I would just start hearing her in the back being like, "Come on, man, get out of the way," and I was like, "Oh, I guess that's me." And so what I realized is that they're just watching,
Yep.
and they're absorbing, and they're mimicking, and they're like taking direction, they're
Hmm.
receiving permission and guidance. You are doing that for an
Yeah.
industry from your actions, right? And I really think that's the most powerful piece. And so for anyone that's not already following, Pauline's journey, is like, take it as she's one of many examples of folks that have intentionally designed their career in a different way. And yes, it takes effort. It also takes lots of effort to stay in a career that doesn't work for you. Like, I think folks think, oh, well, if I'm going to do something like Pauline did, or my version of it, it's like, oh, all this risk and effort. So there's no risk and effort in doing something that doesn't work for you. Of course there is. And so I think it's
Totally.
all about being reflective about what your values are, what you need in your life, being really curious and quickly testing the different ways that you can try to design something else, and then building that thing. Because whether it's for your family, your friends, your community, other lawyers, your kids, people are watching, and that is making the change. And so, I don't know if do you feel that you're being that example, or is it, if I keep telling you, will you believe it?
um, I didn't set out on this journey to be the example, but I think that I just realized that what I want does not exist out there. So I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to build it. And so
Mhm.
it's terrifying and scary, exactly as you said. And my favorite thing to tell people is that it's like everybody just thinks that you like run off this, you get to the edge of the cliff and then you say, okay, that's it. And then you jump and you go. And then, butterflies and rainbows everywhere. That's not it. I'm sorry to tell you, but that's not how it works. It feels very much like you're sort of, you're scraping, getting couple steps forward, and then you're like, wait a minute, that's not working. And then you go backward a couple steps, and then maybe you take a detour to the side, and then maybe you go over here, and then maybe you try this out. Oh, and then this thing comes back over here. And so it's very messy, and it feels it can feel very uncomfortable and can certainly feel like, what am I doing this for? Everybody warned me and I still did this and now I'm going backwards. That's
Mm.
that's just the normal journey to me. And it's very, I don't, I guess, yeah. So I guess I am leading by example by building something different for myself and figuring it out as I go. And what I'm hopeful is that through my example and through me living it, is that I can share my experiences with other people and maybe it will help them be like, okay, well that checks off this box of this question that I was wondering about, or hey, I feel very similarly, so maybe this works for me, or I don't feel similarly at all, so this actually might
Mhm.
not work for me, and that's
Right.
fine. Like it's all about learning from I think everybody else's experiences, so that when you go to build the thing that you want to build for yourself, because it doesn't exist, you're not totally starting from scratch. You don't feel so alone. You know that there are others who've done this before that you can rely on for support and for some help.
So when you feel like you're falling and those wings haven't come out yet because you're building another new business or you're, you know, trying to figure out how to build a lawyer experience platform as you've done now with Goodlawyer, like when you're building these new things and it feels like, oh, I'm not actually sure I can fly. What what do you do to like reassure yourself? How do you get through those really tough moments? Because anyone that's listening to this is going to take the inspiration and be, if they were thinking about making the change, the highs feel amazing, but inevitably, like you said, you're going to hit those roadblocks. And so, what do you do today? What have you learned to do to like give yourself the confidence and belief to keep going?
I mean, I will say that at one point, so this is just the beginning, this is at one point, I thought to myself, if these idiots can run a business, so can I. And so I think, like, unfortunately, that means, looking around and realizing that there's some mistakes being made that you wouldn't have necessarily made, and realizing, wait a minute, I can do this. But I guess, like, and I use this example a lot. I always think back to, it is hard. All of it's hard. But do you know what was really hard? And I see this with the kids. It was apparently really, really hard for each and every one of us to learn how to tie our shoelaces. It's very hard. It seems basically impossible. Like, I'm just going to wear Velcro shoes for the rest of my life, or slip-ons. No, thank you for the laces. But we learned it, right? And it's
Right.
through, like, in that case, it's specifically through repetition and practice and learning that you get there and you learn it. And then it seems like no big deal. But every one of us got to this place in our life doing hard things, learning things that we didn't know how to do, but then we ultimately learned how to do it, and failing a lot, probably, and figuring it out as we go. And sometimes it's just a little tiny little dash of luck that will help you get by. But like, we were all in those positions before and we made it. We got to where we are today, and we either learned lessons, or we failed and we've learned lessons what not to do again and what to do next time, or we've succeeded and we've also learned lessons about, hey, that worked really well last time, maybe I'll try that again, or I almost did that and wow, that would have blown up in my face, so I had a near miss. We've all done these things before. It's We are smart, intelligent, we're curious, want to learn, interested in growing and developing. Generally, I would think as a profession, this is no different. It's not
Right.
anything different at all. There's just no person standing ahead of you to say, this is how it's done. Check, 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 check. And if you don't check these things, you're a failure. There's just nobody telling you that, but it's no different. You can tell yourself that. You know when things are not going well, you know when things are going well and what feels right. And it always just comes back to, like we talked about earlier, knowing yourself. You have to flip the framing of it. You need to know who you are, what you want out of life, and how these things fit in. And if you failed, but you really, really want to do it, think about it some more. I'm sure you will find a different way to get there. If you're succeeding and you don't really know how you feel about that, you don't think you love it, then maybe it's not for you. And then you don't need to worry about that part and you scratch that out and move on to something else.
Mm. Yeah, I love that testing and learning piece. I'm always trying to think about like what is the quickest no to low cost thing you can
Yeah.
test so that you can see if something else might be interesting. Because I think whenever we take an idea out of our minds and we get it like out of our mouth or we try it out, we learn so much more than we think we knew in our minds. So like I'll tell people if they're thinking about a new career path, I'll say like, okay, well, go find a really nicely rated podcast about that industry and listen to it for 5 days and then come back and tell me, like great speakers that you want to find or
Mm-hmm.
whatever exercises I give them. Really, it's just a proxy to see how excited you are to do the thing. Will you
Totally.
go and find the podcast? Will you listen to it each day? Will you because what I find is there's lots of things that we are trained to be good at. This
Mm-hmm.
is different than the things that bring us good energy by doing them.
Yeah.
This is what I found, being a lawyer in BigLaw and then in house was I was trained to be good at it. I felt less energy after doing it.
Yeah.
Versus now when I'm like coaching or like advising businesses or like this conversation, I'm going to have more energy after
Yeah.
doing it. Yet I can be good at both of those things. And I think what we were trained with is
Yeah.
like being good at stuff and there's like a badge of honor that it is depleting. And so that is a
Yeah.
signal to
Yeah.
value instead of, oh, like this was fun for me and it was
Yeah.
impactful and it felt valuable and I got energy from doing it. It almost feels like there's a trick. Like I shouldn't get paid for that. And I just
Totally.
deeply believe that's exactly what you should get paid for. And so, I think that with you running your businesses, fractional GC, head of lawyer experiences, you're doing slices of different things that bring you energy in the way you want to do those different elements of your life, and you're getting paid to do it. And so, this
Yeah.
isn't a mirage. It takes lots of effort, but anything takes lots of effort. Being a lawyer in any facet takes a lot of effort. And
Yeah.
so when you think back to, this career that you have designed, and the great news for everyone is you've got to come to the Future of Law Summit because Pauline and I are co-hosting it November 21. So you're going to get to hear lots more from her if you like this. But when you think about this curiosity that you have and this career that you're designing, like what does the future of your career look like? Like, do you have a thought for like over the next 5 years, how you're seeing your career innovate, how you're seeing the industry innovate? Like, where do those two things overlap?
Yeah. I think that the future of law is really about lawyers being able to be the diverse individuals that they are. And how that manifests is potentially in a full-time practice, with lots of different fractional mandates or not, or maybe it's just a part-time practice. But the bottom line is lawyers get to do exactly what they want to do that reflects the diverse individuals they are. And I keep saying that because I constantly feel that we go into law school and we're told specifically, even when you apply to law school, diversity is great. If you have all these experiences, you don't need to have a, legal background or you don't need to even have a business background. Do whatever your background is, we welcome you because we'll teach you the law. And the diversity of your background is actually your strength because you will be able to work with people from all walks of life, businesses,
Mm-hmm.
people, whatever, because you have that background and you bring that perspective into the law. The law doesn't live in a vacuum. Yet, we then go through law school and then we go into practice and then it's like drop out all of it. We don't care about any of the rest of it. You are a lawyer now and that's all you are. Drop the rest. So the future of law for me is a different future than we have now in the sort of traditional practice paths because lawyers get to do what they want and how they want to. And if that means that they're practicing full time in one single business, that is what they want and that is what they love. And that is, speaks to the diversity of who they are and their experiences and they get to use their experiences and perspectives that way. Wonderful. If that is not, and instead you want to have 5 different fractional clients that are all in different industries because you have this love of business and love of all these different industries and different areas, great. That's what you get to do. And you get to bring all of your perspectives and your background into that so that you can best serve the customer. So
Right.
to me, it's all about letting lawyers be who they are. And instead of taking that middle part where we say, okay, forget it all, don't do it, you're none of that, you're just a lawyer, I want to get rid of that part of it. Let's just keep lawyers as who they are and keep all of the diverse experiences and perspectives that they have so that they can take that through law school and take that into working with clients and building both the profession in a way that supports that kind of diversity, but also then meaning that that leads to helping clients, all the diversity of clients out there, in a way that is customized for what they need. And you can only do that when you have your own diverse perspectives to add to the
Yeah.
mix of it, right?
Right. Right. You know, I mean, like purchasing legal services around the world, it does feel very uniform in the conversations that you have with providers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I totally get that. I remember I would talk to clients. You know, you're doing deals with them. You get to know them really well. When I was in a law firm, and you start to become I would become very casual in the way that I would speak with them. And I remember some partners in being in my office, like listening to my phone calls, thinking like I'd hang up the phone and they'd be like, "Chad, why are you talking to that guy like that
Yeah.
or that person like that?" And I remember thinking, well, I mean, I've talked to them 24 times today, and that's kind of the level of conversation we're at. And you know, I try to like reflect the energy that I'm also receiving. And so if they're feeling very casual and comfortable with me, like I don't really want to speak in a very formal robotic style back to them because it's going to be
Totally.
disengaging from a relationship perspective. And so that's what
Totally.
I love about that diversity piece is like, how do you like to communicate? How do you
Mm-hmm.
like to connect with people?
Mm-hmm.
How do you like to share what you're passionate about?
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? Everyone's a human.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're in business, you're in the arts, you're a lawyer, like everyone's a human and we all have these interests. And that's what allows us to really bond is by, you know, like sharing how we communicate and being curious about other people. Like not that many folks are that interested in hearing purely about the laws. And so I think the faster we get into like who we are, the better we'll
Mm-hmm.
connect.
I
You're a
also,
great example of that.
sorry, I was just going to jump in and say, you know what, I think part of what makes it so difficult for so many lawyers is that they don't have the flexibility or freedom to do exactly what you just said. They don't they don't have the ability to communicate and to, work with clients and to even present themselves the way that they feel like presenting themselves
Yeah.
in the traditional in the past practice in the traditional sort of practice ways, right? And so because of that is what you talked about earlier. It is very hard to do work that maybe you love or maybe you kind of like, but also on top of all of the pressure and anxiety and stress that comes with the actual work itself, then on top of that, it's like, oh, I'm not saying the things the way I need to say them. I'm not writing the way I need to write. Oh, I'm not dressed the way I need to, or whatever it is, right? And that just adds so much more to how hard it is to do those things. And it's like you
Yes.
said, it's so hard and so difficult to squeeze yourself into a role that you don't want to be in for whatever reason, whether it's the work or the other things. It's so hard to do that. It's frankly, I think, much easier, like to bring it back to what we were talking about earlier, it's frankly much easier, I think, to be doing the hard work of building yourself and designing yourself a life that you want, a work life that you want, and that is meaningful to you. When you do that hard work, at least what comes out of it is you get energy from it. You leave these
Yeah.
interactions with more energy than you had, maybe even going into it.
Yeah.
And that carries out into all of the rest of your life, whether it's more work or whether it's with your family or your other
Right.
businesses or whatever that looks like. When you spend all of your time trying to squeeze and contort yourself into this weird, not me type of way of working, it eats away at you. It eats away at every little last piece of you. And then when you go into the day, you might have energy, but you come out of the day and you're just drained. You were
Yeah. It
so busy
bleeds.
not being
It
you,
bleeds out
right?
for sure. No
Yeah.
matter which way, like whether you feel great or you don't feel great, we can put it away when we close our laptop. It doesn't work that way. You know, I've deeply felt that and seen that from myself in both sides of the spectrum too. So totally agree there. Want to ask you three quick rapid fire final questions here.
Okay.
So I'll give you a quick question. First thought that comes to your mind. Okay, the first one is, what would you tell the Pauline during that darkest time of being a lawyer that thought, I want to get the heck away from this industry as far as I can go? For anyone that is listening to this that might be feeling the same way, what advice would you give that Pauline?
That Pauline should know that that is the best possible place to be in, because that is now telling you everything is up from here. And now you know exactly what led to you being in this deep, dark, terrible moment. let's do everything we can to find something new that is not going to take us back to this place. So in doing that, I would say don't follow the path that everybody tells you to go down blindly. Know yourself, know what's right for you. Don't judge yourself on any of it, and especially don't judge yourself by the standards of the people that told you to go down that path in the first place. No judgments. Figure out who you are, what you want, and then figure out what path aligns with that, and then go that way. Go that way. Don't
That's a
follow it
lot
blind.
of
Don't follow what other
self-belief.
people want you to do blindly. Yeah, believe in yourself.
Yeah.
You got this far in life. You can get
Yeah.
farther. And you don't need the advice of those other people who are just telling you to go down a path because you should and for no
Yeah.
other good reason.
That's beautiful. I mean, it's kind of like creating your own definition of success,
Hmm.
instead of it being given to you, but creating it yourself. I remember
Totally.
leaving BigLaw and saying to someone like, "Well, if I don't go build my own dream, then I'll just be building someone else's." And I didn't even know what my dream was yet. I just
Yeah.
knew that those were the two options. And I don't know when the lights are going to fully go dark on this life. And I just felt like if I wasn't trying to build my own thing, then I would be pretty upset at myself. So I think that's really, really well said. You've built something that seems very normal to you now, but at one point, this like very diverse career that you have with different businesses and family life and fractional GC and Goodlawyer, like this wasn't your life. And so for folks that are listening to this saying like, well, I'm where I'm at, which I'm dissatisfied, Pauline's all the way over here. And it seems to me that like creating this very intentionally designed career seems extremely impossible. And so what do you wish folks would know that are at the earlier stage of trying to design their own career and not just follow the stream? Like, what is the one thing you wish everyone knew about this more kind of collective, diverse career that you've built for yourself now?
Oh, this sounds so cliche, but it's not impossible. It's not at all. I'm just me. I don't feel like I've done anything special. I don't think there's anything special going on behind the scenes. It's simply that I looked at what was in front of me, the choices, and was like, nope, maybe, and okay, maybe, and then headed in that direction. Like it's not impossible. One step at a time, one phone call at a time, one email at a time, one small introduction to a person that you didn't know before today at a time. You will slowly get down that path, and suddenly you're realizing, oh God, I'm on the path. I didn't even realize I was here. It's just one little thing at a time, and it's not impossible. It's the people who end up with these things that seem so impossible are the same people that were in your shoes. They just took one little tiny step at a time, even if it didn't feel like anything substantial. Reach out to somebody, have a coffee with somebody that you don't otherwise maybe want to or wouldn't because you don't understand what's going on there. Like ask the questions, say the things, meet the people. It's one tiny little step at a time, and it's nothing
Yeah.
special. There's no magic to it. People may try to make you think there's some magic, and oh, they were in this specific situation, and oh, this and that, or these people they knew. It's not that. It's not that at all. It's just the person who wants it. You put that, North Star ahead of you, and you just keep taking those one little tiny steps at a time. Some are big steps, some are small steps. One little thing at a time. You will get there
Yeah.
and enjoy the journey because the journey is messy and all over the place, like I said before. But enjoy the journey because you're learning so much and you're growing and you're finding out things that nobody else knows because you know what? Those other people, they're not taking your path. They're on a different path and it might be a
Yeah.
traditional path or it might be their own path, but they don't know. Take
Yeah.
anybody's criticisms and feedback with a grain of salt. Listen to
There's
that little voice inside of you.
there's this cool book. I find like kids' books should really just be like
Yeah.
adults should have to read them for their own purposes too, because they're like such great wisdom. But there's one called I think it's like Where the Road Leads or Where the Road Goes, something like this. And it's about this kid who's going on this journey and doesn't know where everything's gonna go and keeps asking the kind of path to tell the kid like what happens next and what if I'm worried about this. They want to know all the answers. And I think at one point the kid says, well, what happens when I get to the end? Like, what is at the end? And the path, the narrator kind of says, like, you know, don't only think about where you're at now and where the ending is. Like, enjoy the middle part too.
Yeah.
And that really stuck out at me because that was something that I realized as I was existing that for most of 30 something years, like maybe until 5 to 10 years ago, I was not really even paying attention to what I was doing. I was just trying to do and achieve, and then
Yeah.
figuring out the next thing to do and achieve. And living the middle part too is something that I wasn't doing. And so that always really stuck out at me when I read that. And I think that's a nice part of your message about ask the questions, build the journey, enjoy the journey, because you don't
Yeah.
know how long you've got and where it's going to go. That's really
Totally. And
beautiful.
that middle journey is actually the part where you like everybody thinks you set the goal and you follow it, which is was what I said also. But what I also want to say is that goal moves. It moves. As you
Mm-hmm.
go through that middle journey, you're like, wait a minute, I actually don't really like this as much as I thought. Okay, we need to sort of pivot this way. And so now that goal moves this way with you, right? So you have to enjoy the middle part. The middle part is actually presenting you even more opportunities and even more options for where this could all ultimately end up. And so you can't be too focused on the goal and just go directly straight to it. There's a whole bunch of like swimming around and whatever. But if you enjoy that piece of it, you're also going to actually realize, oh, that can become part of that goal. Or no, I
Right.
actually don't want that goal. We're going to move that goal slightly to the left, slightly to
Right.
the right, whatever. So it's actually enjoying that middle part of the journey is actually just as critical to getting to your goal, which moves as knowing what that goal is. You have to be able
Yeah.
to be flexible in terms of what you want, who you are, where you are in life. Things change also, right?
Yeah.
You may have
Well, and
started
you're
here, but
growing at the same time. Like if you pick
totally.
one goal and you're going through all these life changes and growth and years and experience, that if you don't change with it, then maybe that's even a question right there, because how could it remain that static? Which
Mhm.
is just so kind of pervasive in our industry. Like start
Yes.
day one, there's the final ending point, and then just forever you do that. And if it works for you, then beautiful. But if it doesn't work for you, then you need to ask yourself the question, which I had to ask myself that question too. But okay, so last question. We've had such a great time getting to know each other over the last few months really well, but we're still, even though we're deep friends, we're newer friends. And so what is something that we haven't talked about yet that you want to know?
Well, actually, what I want to know is what you think the future of law looks like.
Hmm. I think the future of law, I hope for the future of law, that folks realize that they can be very good at things, but the thing that they're best at is probably the thing they're not paying much attention to. Because I really believe that a lot of us were trained with, especially if you're in the legal industry, value equals the grind. And so anything that feels very difficult and clunky, but you do it, is highly praised through this internal coding and other people patting us on the back. The reverse is also true, which is these things that are very natural are almost seen as weaknesses or go unnoticed because they're not hard. And so when I think about my own experience, I'm a Pisces, I'm a pretty relational guy, but I was like a big athlete growing up. And so I got, a lot of this coding around like competition and winning and first and make the thing. And like, I was kind of always doing the milestone thing, but I actually didn't really care that much. All I really care about are relationships. And that's actually my motivator to like achieve these things. And so I'm in BigLaw and I'm meant to, feel like a shark, but I don't feel like a shark. I feel like Flounder the fish or something, I'm like going around like trying to be friends and like figure out who
Yeah.
people are and I thought for a long time that maybe that would be the weakness, that would be the undoing of me forever. And it was only through like 10 years that continues today of personal therapy that like having a deep conviction in who I am and knowing that those natural abilities I have to read people, understand them, and empathize and converse with them and engage with them and help them, that's always been my greatest strength. And I just wasn't paying attention to it because it was too easy for me. That thing is easy for me. Lots of things are hard. That thing's easy. So I didn't pay attention to it. And people weren't telling me because they were like, Chad's good at creating relationships with people. What do we got to tell him that for? People praised things that were very difficult to do. And so because of both those things, I wasn't giving myself very much credit for the stuff I liked the most, that I'm greatest at, that had the biggest impact. And the only way I realized this was number one, therapy being a massive
Hmm.
component of my life. And it remains now. Like I don't wait for life crisis. It's just like a diet.
Yeah.
It's just in my life. and sharing that message, because the more that I shared what I deeply cared about, the more that it resonated with people in a way that I don't feel like I had ever created impact through these deep technical skills that I had learned. And so
Right.
what I hope for folks is that everyone starts to put in even a little bit of energy to figure out what their natural gift is. It's compelling for you, but also it'll be your greatest impact, and it'll release like
Yep.
the greatest value in your career. That's what I see in the people that I work with. That's what I've seen in my own career. That's what I see in your career, is that there's some collection of unique traits and skills for you. Clearly there's an entrepreneurialism, there's a curiosity, there's like a desire to become really grounded with who you are. And you combine those things, you share that message, and you're able to do all kinds of impactful businesses and help other businesses that just wouldn't have been possible if you didn't leverage those gifts. So that's my hope
Oh,
for the future of law.
I just love that. I love that so much. And it's so, it speaks so much to what we were talking about earlier, which is that every lawyers are just humans. We all came from
Mhm.
all various different places to go to law school and then to get into law. We have so many collectively, if you even just imagined it as a bubble of skills, collectively, we are all so strong together if we can actually take advantage of whatever our strengths are as a human, and not just the strengths
Mhm.
that, like you said, we are told in life and or in practice, these are the strengths you need, these other things are actually weaknesses, and these are the things that you need to focus on, and blah blah blah. No, we all have our own strengths that can contribute to the profession so much more if we actually let lawyers be comfortable with expressing that and doing the things the way they do things, communicating with clients, whatever it might be. Let people do things the way they want to do things and how they do it best, and let those lawyers show off their strengths the way they want to show it off.
Yeah.
And not just these things that we, for some reason, some person, some lawyer back in time was like, these are good, these are bad,
Right.
everybody needs to do this. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're the example, my friend. You're doing it, and you're showing folks that it is possible. And so for everyone that listens to this, find Pauline Chan on LinkedIn, head of lawyer experience at Goodlawyer, fractional GC, fortune cookie business, bar studio, family, all things keynote speaker and inspiration for the industry. So thank you for being the example, my friend, to let other folks know that they can build their own career and design it in a way that fits within their life. So thank you for sharing your time. For everyone who listened to this, thank you for sharing your time with us on the What You're About podcast and the Future of Law Summit, November 21. You're going to want to hear a lot more from Pauline there. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me.